All of them were present, sat in winged Chesterfields in a semicircle around the fire. It was Desmond's turn to tell a ghost story. This was his initiation night. If his story was good enough, he would be accepted into the club. He stood in front of the fireplace. All eyes were upon him. It was the end of November. The golden days of autumn had fled, and it was too early to feel the approaching cheer of Christmas. He paused for dramatic effect, seeking reassurance from his champion, Theodore. "Get on with it, man," Theodore said. It was as if they were still in the Crimea together. Desmond lifted his chin and continued. A fog hung in the air, a real pea souper. I was going back to my townhouse in Camberwell. Walking past the bandstand in Myers Field, I was surprised to see candles burning and a band playing. A hunched figure was selling roast chestnuts from a brazier. Their smell enticed me. "Farthing a bag, sir?" The chestnut-monger looked up, and where his nose should have been was just a hole, his features eroded by syphilis. A wave of revulsion made my stomach heave, and I lifted my palm outwards in a gesture of refusal. Something about the way his skull showed through his skin made me dig out a farthing anyway. A talisman of protection, perhaps. "God bless you, sir." He doffed his cap. "May you be lucky in love." Back at home, my housekeeper was setting freshly baked scones on the table. I rubbed my cold hands together. "Mrs. Trimble, I would love one of those tempting-looking scones of yours." "Not straight away, sir. It will give you terrible indigestion." I laughed lightly. "You're right, of course, Mrs. Trimble. I'll take a glass of port in the library." The port soothed my spirit, and when Mrs. Trimble brought in tea and buttered scones, my contentment was complete. I was seated by the window. Above the jumbled skyline, a new moon rose. Muscles in my shoulders tensed as I thought of the encroaching night. My bedroom, you see, was no longer the place of sanctuary it should have been. At around 2:30 in the morning, a weight would descend on the end of my bed. A human form. Gaslight from outside cast her delicate profile into shadow. She was an attractive lady. Wealthy, she wore a fur about her neck and her hair up in a chignon. After a few minutes she would stand and glide from my room straight through the door. Her lily-of-the-valley perfume would linger. It was a scent I knew and loved from the grounds of my country home in Berkshire. After a while her visits revealed a pattern. She appeared only on new and full moons. Mrs. Trimble swore that the lady had never been seen before. "There's no ghouls in this house. This is a Christian house, this is. Ghosts are most surely not welcome here, and I won't have anyone contradicting me." Mrs. Trimble was an intelligent woman, but uneducated. I didn't contradict her after the third or fourth sighting of the lady. It was a waste of energy, and besides, when I saw the lady in fur, although at first alarmed, something inside me was stirred. The sensation was not unholy, unpleasurable. The next day, whilst walking home from chambers, I took a different route, not through the park. The aroma of the roasting chestnuts, coupled with the physical repellence of their cellar, created a conflict within me that was not conducive to the relaxation I craved that day. No, I would walk along Camberwell High Street, by the music hall, turn right at the church, and perhaps stop for a cheering drink at the Grapes Tavern. As I approached the music hall, something arrested me in my tracks. It was a life-size poster of a woman in silhouette. The saliva drained from my mouth. The fur collar and the chignon, the pretty upturned nose, the generosity of the lips. This was the lady who had haunted the end of my bed these last few months. It was, as the Cockneys say, brass monkey weather. But even so, beads of sweat appeared on my top lip. I read the poster. Mademoiselle Isoline Villiers, the Nightingale from Paris, for one night only at Camberwell Music Hall. The date was that very evening. The show began at 8:30. I went straight to the Grapes and ordered a double Scotch whisky. While I sipped the tawny liquid, I overheard a conversation from the snug. "She's as French as I am. Mademoiselle Isoline Villiers? My arse, that's Swanee Pen from Dab Peckham way." She's not from Paris at all, but she can sing all right, that one. And I've heard," the woman lowered her voice, "that she can do other things with them rosy lips as well." A cackle of laughter came from the snug, and in the mirror above the bar, I saw the two red-cheeked doxies swigging back their gin before going out to walk the street. "The pot calling the kettle black," I mused. I paid for my drink and went home. Mrs. Trimble was a fountain of knowledge regarding working-class do's and don'ts. I asked her opinion in respect of my escapade. "Mrs. Trimble," I asked, "would it be seemly for a gentleman to be seen in a music hall?" She looked up and her eyes popped wide open as if she'd just taken a sniff of potent vinegar. "You, sir, in a music hall? Is the idea so strange?" "Well, you'd have to be in a box, sir, not down in the stalls with the riffraff." "A box? Very well, and what does one wear to such an occasion?" "You can wear what you think is fitting, sir. Evening dress, I suppose, but whatever you do, don't talk to the performers." "Why ever not?" "Because them women that trots the boards is unclean. And I've heard about that one singing there tonight." I pressed her. "What have you heard?" "That she is no better than she should be." There was a long queue outside the theatre, but I strode past the rabble and gave sixpence to the doorman. The seats in the box were upholstered in red velvet, and as I sat down, plumes of dust filled the air. A low murmur came from the crowd below. They drank and smoked and talked, and the atmosphere, if only I'd not felt so out of place and alone, was quite convivial. A comedian performed first. His South London accent was so thick I couldn't understand him, but when the punchlines came, guffaws of laughter carried up from below, and I found myself involuntarily chuckling along. Then came a fellow with a performing dog. The dog jumped through hoops of fire, and the audience oohed and ahed like children. By this time, my patience was wearing thin. Finally, after a woman dressed as a man sang some bawdy ditties, the act I'd been waiting for appeared. Mademoiselle Isoline Villiers stepped out onto the stage, and it was as if something inside me that had always been broken was put together again. A recognition of the other half of my soul. She sang some French songs which were unfamiliar to me, but were clearly about love. Her voice was pleasant enough, a tolerable mezzo-soprano, but not, I felt, entirely deserving of the title Nightingale. After she'd finished, she curtsied and blew kisses to the audience. Then she looked up at me, and as our eyes locked, she stumbled backward and visibly paled. She crossed herself as if I represented some malignant spirit. This did not bode well. Perhaps I should have felt the same thing about her, having seen her previously only as an apparition. But when she had entered my bedroom, it was only on that very first night I'd been afraid. After that, although her visits alarmed me, I looked forward to seeing her, longed for her even. Afterwards, of course, I had to meet her. Another sixpence went to one of the stagehands, who led me through a narrow corridor that smelled of sweat and cheap scent. He knocked 3 times on Mademoiselle Villiers' door. "Entrez," called a voice with a heavy French accent. She sat, unpinning her hair in front of the dressing table. Our eyes met in the mirror. Lily of the Valley scent filled the room, but now it was rancour, mingled with perspiration. She stood up to face me. Her Rubenesque bosoms drew my gaze. But, although I had little knowledge of proper dressing room etiquette, I did not think it proper to keep staring at her breasts. Aside from that, they aroused lascivious thoughts in me. She took 3 steps towards me, and in a manner which I found both pleasurable and disturbing, ran her delicate hands over my body from head to toe. "You're real then," she said. "My God, you are real. A real flesh and blood man, not a ghost after all." There was absolutely no trace of the French accent anymore. Her voice was pure South London. "Why on earth would you not think me real?" I asked. "Because, my friend, you've been appearing to me these past few months in my bedroom every new and full moon, sitting on the edge of the bed." I stared at her, open-mouthed, unable to speak. You must think me some kind of lunatic." She looked shy, all at once young and unworldly. I wanted to put my arms around her. No, my dear, I don't think you a lunatic. I've had the very same experience myself. Each night at the new and full moon, you come to me." Desmond clasped his hands together, signalling the story's finale. "So you see, my good gentleman, this ghost story doesn't end in death or ill omen. Quite the contrary. For my wife and I..." Theodore stood up quick as the jack-in-the-box. "You married the woman? You married a woman from the music hall?" "No," Desmond riposted. "I did not marry a woman. I married a lady. But you see, gentlemen, my wife and I had to meet first as spirits. How else would two souls from such dissimilar backgrounds come together? Unless, of course, it was down the back alleys of Camden Town," Theodore muttered. Desmond opened the heavy panelled door, and his good lady wife walked in. Her russet locks cascaded down her heliotrope dress. The gentlemen's eyes swelled in their heads as though some exotic creature from the jungle had entered their midst. With a vivacious toss of her head, Swanee addressed them. "Now, gentlemen," she said, in cut-glass English, "which of Shakespeare's sonnets shall I recite for you tonight?"